Hi all, this is Robert Wilburn from ArchiveSocial. Welcome to the webinar. We're going to get started in just about 2 minutes here. We're waiting for just a few more people to log in. In the meantime, we've got the chat window open and the question window, and if you have any thoughts or questions you'd like to send to us, you can do that. And again, we'll get started in about 2 minutes. And this is Robert from ArchiveSocial. Welcome to today's webinar on avoiding social media lawsuits. We just have a few more people logging in here. At this point, you should be able to see a screen with the title. If for some reason you can't, can you please let us know in the question window? Okay, and so we're going to just do a quick housekeeping slide. So all attendees are on mute. There's a question function on the right. You can use that to submit questions. There'll be time for Q&A throughout the presentation, but please ask questions along the way as Anil is presenting, and we'll either answer in the chat window or Anil will answer verbally. And then finally, this webinar is being recorded. You'll receive a copy via email. We're going to try to move at a pretty fair clip through the material, but again, ask questions along the way if you have it. All right, so about our speaker. So Anil Chawla today will be our speaker. He's the founder and CEO of ArchiveSocial. He's also the co-host of the popular GovTech Social podcast. And Anil speaks frequently at national conferences on legal policy records management issues related to social media, whether it's in government, law enforcement, or education. So about a quick word on ArchiveSocial. If you're not familiar with us, we work close to 1,000 agencies around the country, public agencies, that includes law enforcement, as well as school districts. We work with the smallest of towns to the largest of cities, so including cities such as New York City and Chicago. And recently, in Q1, in January, we launched the first open archive of social media for a US president. At the tail end of the Obama administration, we were asked to come in and provide an archive for the 8 years of social records. So without further ado, I'd like to hand it over to Anil.
Well, thank you, Robert, for the introduction, and thank you all for carving out time on your busy Tuesday to join us. I want to go ahead and get into the meat of the presentation today. And as a speaker, as a frequent speaker and a presenter, my goal, as it often is for a presenter, is to make people laugh, to be entertaining. But when your team puts the word lawsuit into the title of a presentation, that makes it quite hard. So I'm going to be really honest with all of you today. I might not be that funny, but what I am going to do is I will probably talk about, when I talk about these issues, I'll probably talk about them in a way that may sound a little bit scary. Now, the title of this presentation is How to Avoid a Social Media Lawsuit. And we're here to be a resource to you to talk about how to get ahead of those issues. So while we will have a lot of scary stories, you'll see how some agencies did get into trouble. There were some costs, some issues. The goal, again, is to arm you so that you can be proactive and get ahead of these issues. And we're here to be a resource to you. And so the two core questions that we're looking to answer in this presentation today, one is, what are those challenges? What are those legal risks that you should be aware of that other agencies like yours have already encountered? So we'll talk through the different types of risks based on the case law and the news stories that we're seeing in the space, and of course, the customers that we work with across the country. And then secondly, let's talk about solutions. How can you avoid that risk? How can you get ahead of it, mitigate it, avoid that lawsuit if at all possible? Now, being a government agency, lawsuits do happen. And so if you're not able to avoid it, then how do you best position your agency to survive that lawsuit in a way that you can move on and continue to serve your citizens? Now, we talk about this as being, again, a scary topic, but it's so critical. And the reason why it's critical is because of how valuable social media is to you as a government agency or a school district or a law enforcement agency, how valuable it is to your agency, as well as how valuable it is to your citizens. So as we sit here in 2017, based on what's happened in government, I really don't need to tell you how social media is making a difference day to day, but it's so clear throughout the industry that social media is a primary way now for how government serves its citizens It has really transformed the conversation, has transformed the way that information is disseminated, has transformed the ability for you to save lives in the midst of a crisis. And that is why it's then important for us to talk about this issue and how we can protect your agency's use of social media and protect your agency in the long run so that you can continue to benefit from this platform. And ultimately, with this topic of lawsuits and legal risk, while again it's scary, it's really a part of life in government because government plays such a foundational, central role in people's lives, and because of the impact government makes, and now because of the impact social media makes in government, lawsuits will happen, or the threat of lawsuit will be there. And again, our goal is to minimize that, avoid it, and certainly be able to work through it if it were to happen. So, before we jump into the topics, it's really important for us at ArchiveSocial to understand our audience and focus on the issues that you care about. So we're putting a poll on the screen right now to ask you, what risks are you most concerned about with your current use of social media? Okay, all right, so perhaps what we should have done in this presentation is talk about the risks of running a technology-oriented webinar. So I think we've survived that. Those of you on the line, hopefully you're able to hear me again, and here in a moment you should be able to see my screen again. Sorry for that temporary glitch, but we do have those poll results, and we have quite a response here. A quarter of the people on this webinar today concerned about deleted or hidden comments from citizens. A significant amount of you are concerned about mistakes. Mistakes do happen, right? And it's also possible that even if you do the right thing, that you're misinterpreted. Public records law, always a big issue. And then public officials, at about 9% of the audience, the issue that's really growing, I think, in awareness. So with that, we are going to get the screen going again on my end. We'll make sure that I'm a presenter. And so thank you all for bearing with us as the GoToMeeting actually crashed in the midst. Hopefully the rest of you didn't have the same problem. We see we've got quite an audience tuned in at the moment. And I'm about to bring my screen back, and we can move on from the poll and get into the content. And I think we're back. So thank you all again for your patience with the issue. And let's get into the topic here on how does, what kind of issues does an agency face? How does risk come up in the use of social media in government? And so we actually have a few key risks that we want to focus on here today. And the number one, we saw this in the poll, about a quarter of you concerned about it, is this issue of your citizens are able to participate in this two-way conversation on social media, which is the beauty of social media. But then it also raises this First Amendment concern. And while many citizens interact with you in a productive manner, there's always that group that does not. There's always that potential troll or that person that's upset about something. And then it may not be a productive conversation. And so most agencies want to keep the presence clean, hide, or perhaps even delete content. And it raises First Amendment concerns. So if you're not familiar with this, there's actually quite a lot that's happening in this space, going all the way back to 2012. In fact, in 2012, the first lawsuit of its kind related to government social media came out of of basically this First Amendment concern. And what happened here is that in the city of Honolulu, the Honolulu Police Department, on their Facebook page, they were receiving commentary from a citizen related to gun ownership, gun rights, obviously a controversial topic. And the police department decided to remove that commentary because they felt like it was off topic. And the citizen felt like he was being censored. And so he actually got together with this advocacy group, the Hawaii Defense Foundation, and filed this lawsuit. Again, one of the first lawsuits of its kind, really the first lawsuit related to government social media that we're aware of, saying that, hey, look, you guys don't have a policy right now. And in truth, at the time, Honolulu did not have a policy posted. So it's not fair for you to remove our commentary. We want you to reinstate our commentary, and we want you to set up a policy that says you will allow us to say anything we want because of our First Amendment rights. So this was the first true test of that First Amendment right on a government forum. Unfortunately, again, because the city did not have a policy in place, they were not well positioned, and they ended up settling the lawsuit, allowing the citizens to effectively post whatever they wanted to. Now, moving past 2012, the best practice in the industry really has been adopted to say, look, this is a limited public forum. This is not an open forum, but it is critical that governments make that clear in a policy stating what is allowed and what's not. And so that was a big lesson learned from the Honolulu situation, to establish a policy. Now, 5 years later, this is still a challenge that agencies are running into. And so in 2014, San Diego Sheriff's Department, they were removing posts from somebody on their Facebook page. They were challenged through a lawsuit. And what they did is they decided just to shut down Facebook. Now, that may seem like an easy fix in the short term, but it's a long-term loss for you and your citizens, because, again, this is the primary way in general for government to communicate with the public today, is across social networking channels. So that's what we want to avoid, that outcome of you shutting down Facebook and then not being able to experience all the other benefits due to this one problem in this one area. So keep going. Well, let's get to 2016. Again, Beech Grove, Indiana, now a different state, decided to remove posts that were critical, and the ACLU got involved, right? So this is an issue that's been growing and growing in terms of importance and impact. All the way to 2017, we're seeing this almost every week, in a way, across the country in different states, this issue of a public agency removing commentary and then facing a lawsuit. So we're going to talk about that how you approach this, but for now, let's lay out that problem as a major problem of agencies not knowing when it's appropriate to hide or remove content and then facing this First Amendment concern. The second risk that we want to dive into today is related to public officials. Now, obviously, any government staff member using social media has to be careful about what they say, but public officials are certainly in a different kind of spotlight, and you can see that from the public officials in your city and your state all the way to the federal level. Of course, the President of the United States is in quite a spotlight with our current president's use of social media. And the biggest issue that we're seeing today is that while an agency might have a policy in place, while they might be following guidelines in terms of how the internal staff is using social media, public officials are currently approaching social media, and oftentimes, in many cases, as if they are not sort of as if they're exempt from the rules. And so the number one thing to remember is that public officials using social media in an official capacity are subject to the exact same requirements, rules, processes as your agency is, particularly when it comes to things like public records and how they can manage that social media presence. So that's where we're seeing a lot of news stories, frankly, is around these public officials. And just to kind of put a little bit of humor on this. This is an official out of Texas who was mayor, I think, for about 2 weeks. But just to showcase how much social media is being used by public officials, say, even when things aren't going well, this mayor realized that he had signed up for the wrong job, and when he decided to resign, he used Facebook to announce his resignation. So just a sign of the times in terms of how public officials are using social media. But coming back to what we're seeing in the news, this is not hard to find, and we're seeing it day in and day out. Again, you can see a few posts here from these past few weeks in June itself, where various public officials in states across the country are getting in trouble for how they are using social media, and oftentimes in how people feel like they're being censored. So if you're a public official and you start removing comments again, hiding them, same problem as an agency is facing. But we're also seeing public officials blocking people on social media. So this is a really sensitive area to pay attention to. I want to mention one case out of Debary, Florida, where a mayor had engaged in various activities that caused concern in terms of how he was using taxpayer money, but he was using social media quite a bit to talk about them. And so the city actually, while they were investigating this, deciding whether they wanted to essentially fire this mayor, issued a public records request to the mayor for his communications, and social media was at the heart of it. And the city actually ended up having to sue their own mayor for social media posts. Ultimately, he was let go. And in that process, there are numerous news articles about this. And this one article focused on the fact that while social media played such a central role and they were requesting it, they weren't able to get it. And so the city is basically facing this own internal battle of this mayor being a problem and not able to get to their own records of information. And in fact, we're really concerned that the mayor would just refuse to provide information that the city had to have that really belonged to the city. So again, public officials, a case where you need to pay a lot of attention, so we'll talk about that a little bit more. And that actually takes us to our last one. I talked about this records request. In this last area is a major area. I think this was where we had the most responses in that first poll, is around public records, being able to respond to public information requests. Ultimately, there's a records law. And when it comes time to respond to that request, your agency needs to be prepared. And this is a major hole across the country, one that more and more agencies are working to fill. But even today, most agencies are not in compliance with public records laws, may not even be aware that social media is a public record. Many agencies are relying on Facebook and Twitter and YouTube to have those records, which is not a long-term strategy. That information is not guaranteed to be there. And many agencies, some agencies are receiving public records requests specifically for social media, but many agencies are receiving records requests that, while they do not, the records request does not specifically ask for social media, it certainly covers social media. And so agencies may be responding to requests today that are in their response, they're failing to include social media when they should. So this is a major area. We're seeing a lot of interesting case studies, particularly given the work that we do at ArchiveSocial around public records. So we'll talk about it a bit more in terms of how you can resolve that issue. But for those of you who are being introduced to this problem for the first time or want to learn more, it basically stems from the fact that your social media is like anything else that's in a written form in your government. So every single state in the United States has a public records law. Here I have an example from the state of Ohio. And these laws were written a very long time ago, but they were written in a way that was really comprehensive. Basically, regardless of physical form, anything that's written can be a public record. Many states have revised those laws to include electronic records, but even if they haven't done that, regardless of physical form is really the key phrase. And so the way to think about this is that if you were to get a crime tip in on a piece of paper, a crime tip in an email, and a crime tip in a Twitter direct message, these are all crime tips, right? It's that content that makes the difference, and it doesn't matter what form it came in. And so that's why social media is a public record. Now, I mentioned Ohio. Now, if you're not in the state of Ohio or you want to see some of the additional guidance in Ohio, we've put together a map of the United States, each and every state. And when you go to our website, you can go to this link, bit.ly/smpublicrecords. Click on your state. You can see the public records law for your state, and you can see the exact guidance from your Secretary of State's office or your state archives that spells out how, why, when social media becomes public record and what you need to do about it. So this is a well-established issue now in government that social media is a record. But this comes back to, okay, why can't you just rely on the social networks? Well, we actually ran a study here at ArchiveSocial about a year ago to really prove this point out, that the social networks are not record-keeping, they're not archives. They're not records management bodies, right? If you look at the terms of service on Facebook and Twitter, there's absolutely nothing in there that promises that they will keep the records for government. In fact, if you go to Facebook's website for law enforcement, they tell you that you can issue a subpoena only before content's deleted. Once it's deleted, though, they may not be able to help you. So that's the key issue, is that this information might be on Facebook currently at this moment, but will it be there 6 months from now? Will it be there years from now? And we actually ran the study and found that when we sampled 400 government Facebook pages, there were nearly 7,800 deletions. Now that's quite a substantial number, about 20 deletions per page. Now not every page had a deletion, but 3 out of 4 did. And when we looked at some of these pages that had dozens of deletions, what we found is that if you talk to those agencies, they'll tell you that they're not the ones deleting, but in fact the citizens are. And what a citizen says to you is just much, could be as much a public record as what you say to them. So really eye-opening to see how much information is being deleted and disappearing. And to the point that the fundamental concern here is your ability to respond to records requests. Again, there may be records requests that you're seeing today that ask for Facebook and Twitter. We've certainly seen a fair share of those ourselves, given the work that we do. But the bigger issue is that even if a records request does not specifically ask for social media, it's very likely that it should include social media based on how you're using social media today. So, for example, if you're experiencing a weather issue and you're notifying the public of street closures or trees coming down, and then you get a records request for all notifications of the street closure, well, maybe it could be that most of those notifications happen on social media. So you really need to think about social media in the context of the broader public records requests today and assure that your agency is able to fulfill those. And again, this is something that's happening across the country. We have a number of case studies on public records requests. But one that was prominent in the news recently came out of California, where the city and the mayor, police department were actually sued by a woman, and the basis of her lawsuit was that the city did not have public record retention of social media as a public record in the policy, right? So the fact that they did not explicitly state that they have records of social media was the basis of the lawsuit. And so citizens, journalists, and others are becoming very aware of the fact that social media is public record. And then we mentioned, Robert, I think in the intro mentioned our work with the White House. So if you're curious about that, we did work with the Obama administration to help the president meet his record-keeping requirement, which is the Presidential Records Act. This was the past president to cover the 8 years of the Obama administration. As a citizen of the United States, you have access to this information. You can go to our website, archivesocial.com/whitehouse, and see everything from the @POTUS Twitter account to the First Lady's Instagram and beyond. So in summary, I'm going to pause briefly here. We're going to look at some of the questions that have come in. But to summarize, the 3 key issues that we are seeing at the top of the list for public agencies in terms of legal risk: First Amendment concerns, the way public officials are adopting social media, and number 3, public records laws and how they apply to social media content. So we're going to take just a moment here to address at least one question from the audience. And so this question comes in related to blocking individuals from posting. And the question is, can you block somebody from posting? And it really depends on the social networking site. On Twitter, for example, you can block another user from @mentioning you. But of course, they can still read your feed. They just have to log out of their account or use a different account. On Facebook as well, as you can block individuals from posting. One of the problems we see there is that a problematic citizen could then go create another account. So a better thing to do is to establish a clear policy that allows you to moderate. And we'll talk about this and enforce that policy in a consistent fashion. Knowing that this information is being broadcast, people are going to see it. It's very dangerous just to block right out the gate without any kind of policy in place. So we'll talk about the policy here in a second. And one more question here that came in is, what about social media posts with typos or errors that are deleted and then the post is re-released? Can those typo posts be deleted and with the agency still being in compliance with FOIA? The reality of it is that the typo might not have any real implication. So in a lot of cases you're fine, but technically speaking, every communication could come back as a record. So you do want to keep records of everything. You make a typo, you delete the post and repost it. You need a record of what you posted. There could have been misinterpretation. There could be all sorts of outcomes to it. And the thing you have to ask yourself is, if somebody comes back with a lawsuit or records request for it, do you want to fight that and say, oh, that typo was meaningless, right? Will that be a strong case to make? And so in general, you want to keep records of everything you're posting. And then we have some questions coming in related to social media policy. One of these questions is about off-topic, offensive content, and being able to say that if that content is off-topic or offensive, they'll be hidden. That content could be hidden or deleted. And the question is, can you have that kind of language? And so let me do this. Let me actually transition now into some actionable items for everybody listening in, and we'll definitely talk about social media policy here and answer that question. So before we do that, we do again want to get a sense from our audience where everybody's at. So we're going to put a poll on the screen now for all of you, asking you, well, what are you doing today? How are you managing your social media risk? And so this is multiple choice again. It could be that you have a social media policy, you have some kind of ongoing active employee training, you have a process and technology in place for maintaining social media records, and then the rest of you who are just crossing your fingers. But whatever the case is in terms of your approach, we want to hear what it is, and then I'll talk to you about the solutions that we recommend. Okay, so with that, let's go ahead and pull the results now. And so about 57% of you have a social media policy. It looks like folks are doing something all across the board. Our second place winner is crossing your fingers and using 40-leaf clover. So it looks like this is an area, this is why you're here, this is an area that we can provide some guidance, particularly on that social media policy response. 57% of you, I applaud those of you who have a policy. The rest of you, it is absolutely critical. So I'm going to go ahead and jump into that topic and address that last question that we had from our attendee. So how do you avoid lawsuits? It starts with the policy, and I personally, I want to see that number in a poll at 100% today, given the case law, the incidents that we're seeing. Every agency listening in here today, I'll ask you to take an action off of this webinar. Go get a social media policy in place. It is critical, because at the end of the day, there are things that you can do, things you cannot do, but without a policy, you pretty much can't do anything without risk, right? The policy is what enables you to follow through with certain actions. And the policy will cover things like how do you deal with citizen comments? Can you hide them? Can you delete them? To the gentleman's last question, yes, you can have a clause in your policy that spells out those cases of when you will hide or delete comments, but it's critical you have that clause, and it's critical you follow it. It also covers things like how your employees, the staff members of your agency, use social media, and how you separate their personal usage from their professional usage. Is a really important thing to do. And then, of course, the policy should cover record retention. That is fundamental for any government agency. You're all familiar with record keeping with email. So those are the kind of things that your policy needs to first spell out. And so how do you do that? You know, three key items here. One is keep this process simple. I know a lot of agencies who've endeavored down this path have found themselves in meeting after meeting, months after months, 18 months later, still working on a social media policy. And there's really no need to do that today. There are so many agencies out there that have learned the lessons, that have shared best practices, put it together. So don't reinvent the wheel. We at ArchiveSocial have a policy template that we've put together based on what agencies are doing. And we'll get that to you. No cost or obligation. This is a resource that we want to provide. Or you may know an agency that's similar to yours that could provide their policy to you. So to use what's out there, get one in place as soon as possible. Make sure it's publicly posted, especially the aspects of it that relate to citizen comments. You want to put it on your website and a link to it from your social media profiles at a minimum. So every one of your profiles linking back to that social media policy. On certain platforms like Facebook, you can actually embed it. You could add a tab on your Facebook page that shows the policy. But you have to get it out there. So it's not good enough just to have one. Citizens have to know that it's there. And then 3, this is where I think a lot of agencies fall short that do have a policy. Is that you have to consistently enforce it, right? Again, having a policy, making it open and available to the citizens is all essential, but if you're not enforcing it consistently, then that's the broken link in the chain. And so again, to that question that we had coming in about hidden or deleted content, hiding or deleting content based on it being off topic or profane, your policy needs to spell that out. And then if your policy spells that out, and you see it, then consistently enforce it in all cases. Where you can get in trouble is if you're inconsistent or if you're doing something not coherent with your policy. And we like to share examples from agencies that we work with. Fremont, California is a partner agency of ours. They have a great social media comment policy out there that you can look at. I encourage you to check it out. And I also want to talk about one of our customers, Margate, Florida. This is a success story about facing a scary situation and weathering that storm. And what happened here in Margate is that a citizen was promoting their blog, which was commercial in nature. Margate has in their policy that you cannot promote anything commercial in nature. Well, the citizen was promoting this. Margate warned the citizen, remove those comments, and the citizen came back and said, first of all, this is Florida, the Sunshine State. You can't just remove my comments. You have to keep records. And Margate said, well, we do keep records. We have ArchiveSocial, so that's fine. We have what we need. And then the citizen came back and said, yeah, but you're removing my commentary. I feel like you're being inconsistent. I feel like you're singling me out. And then the citizen actually issued a public records request for the last few months of Facebook content saying, show me all cases in which you deleted or hid commentary from citizens. So I want to see if I'm being singled out. And again, Margate, they had a policy, they were enforcing it consistently, and they had our technology in place. And so with a few clicks of a button, they're able to produce a PDF of everything from Facebook showing exactly what had been hidden or deleted. And they gave it to the citizen, and that was the end of the story, right? That's it. They did exactly what they needed to do. They got past that little bump in the road, and it really didn't have any impact or negative impact to their social media approach. And that's exactly the position you want to be in. So again, I mentioned that we have a social media policy template. This is something that we'll send out after the webinar. And again, even if you have a policy, we encourage you to look at this. This is something that we're constantly updating to incorporate best practices because social media is evolving. So it may be a good time for you to do that annual checkup of your social media policy. All right, solution number two, there's policy, then there's training. And this is where you can really make a big impact with your public officials, in addition to the other internal staff that you have. Once you have the policy in place, you need to train everybody on that policy, how to consistently enforce it. I recommend paying special attention to when to remove comments and when not to remove comments, because that again is where we're seeing a lot of the lawsuits come in. And make that consistent, right? There may be cases where there's some gray area, right? Where one of your staff members may have seen a post and really wasn't sure how to deal with it. And so what we see a lot of the agencies do that are successful with this is they have ongoing social media committees that get together and they talk about these issues, and that serves as training. Now, one tool that we found to be extremely helpful for agencies is to take that policy and then refactor it, reformat it into a means that your staff members, your public officials can refer to in a very easy fashion and make sense of it. And so one example of that with this issue of deleting or hiding comments is what Wake County, North Carolina did. They put together a flow chart. So they had the policy, which is a great policy, but again, something that's hard for 20, 30 different people to remember and enforce consistently. So they made this flow chart out of that policy, and every single social media manager can look at a social media post and follow the flow and say, does it have profane language or content? No. Okay. Is it related to the topic? Yes. Okay. Was it a result of experience? And go on and on and on. And make consistent decisions across the agency. So this is also a resource that we have at ArchiveSocial, Wake County's agency that we work with, and we're happy to share that out to all of you. Okay, great. And now number three, fundamentally everything that you do in government can come back, whether that's a public records request or any kind of legal circumstance, any kind of misunderstanding. And so record keeping is critical. Archiving is something that you do for your documents, what you do for your email. You need to be doing it for your social media. Remember that social media is a public record. And I do want to share a case study with another one of our partner agencies, really illustrating how critical it is for you to address this problem now rather than later. Risk is one of those funny things that it's not a problem until it's a problem, right? And so this is exactly what Santa Barbara ran into, where they knew that they needed to treat social media as a public record. They knew they needed to archive, but they kept kicking the can, down the road to the right time, given all of their priorities. And finally, one day we called them and they said, look, we'll start a free trial of your product to see how it works, because we do want to do this. And 3 weeks into that free trial, they received a public records request from the National Rifle Association related to their gun buyback program. Now, the gun buyback program, obviously very controversial, and most of what had happened in terms of communications around the gun buyback program was on their Facebook page. And so this NRA public records request was about all the communications related to the gun buyback program. So if you read this case study, the officer involved said, look, I would have had to scroll through Facebook and manually compile this information. It's likely that I would have missed something. And there are different types of organizations that make public records requests. There's the media, there are citizens, and there are interest groups, right? And you never want to get it wrong. You certainly don't want to get it wrong with someone like the NRA who's trying to ensure that this program is being run in the correct manner. So they had the archive in place thanks to the free trial. They were able to produce the records. They began using ArchiveSocial continually. And because it was so easy for them to respond to this and do it accurately, nothing came out of it, and they were able to run that next gun buyback program without an issue. So with social media archiving, this is our area of expertise. There are some things to keep in mind. Social media is out of your control, so unlike emails, unlike files, unlike anything else that you're used to, all of this information sits in the possession of private third-party companies. Facebook, Twitter, YouTube. Unlike email, again, which your IT can control, Facebook has this data. Twitter has this data. And so this is a very unique challenge. You do have to get it into your control. You cannot rely on those networks again. At any time something can be deleted. They have no obligation to produce the information for you. They have some search capabilities, but those capabilities are not designed for record production. If you try to find something from Facebook from even 6 months ago, you know how hard it can be. And if you're taking screenshots, say, as a number of agencies are, I applaud you for doing something rather than nothing, but you're only getting a piece of the information. There's significant case law around metadata and complete electronic record. And screenshotting is really a stopgap approach. It's really a way for you to keep up with the dynamic conversation on social media and search those screenshots over time and maintain them. A lot of challenges here with record keeping, and the good news is that there are solutions, right? ArchiveSocial is one of those solutions, and what you want to look for in any solution is the ability to capture the complete electronic record data with all that metadata inside of it. Again, there's case law around metadata if you're not familiar with it. We can talk to you about that in more detail. You got to remember that social media conversations are happening with or without you there. Oftentimes you may post something, and then on Saturday night, comments are coming in. People are able to edit what they're saying. They're able to delete what they've said to you. They could send you a crime tip and delete it 15 minutes later. And so these are the kinds of things that a really effective social media archiving solution will take care of for you. A really effective solution will be able to replay that conversation as it happened and help you produce it. And our solution in particular, it's about being as easy as possible. This is something that, while it's a huge challenge and has significant implications, because everything's in the cloud, including these archiving solutions, this is the kind of problem that you can actually solve in 20 minutes, meaning that from the moment that you're able to use that solution, you purchased it, to the time that your pages are all covered and being archived is under 20 minutes in most cases. So it's easy to solve, it's important to do, and that's what we focus on here at ArchiveSocial. So we're happy to talk to you about that in more detail, but more than anything, the reason why we're doing this presentation is that we're here to be a resource to government. Again, we work with nearly 1,000 agencies across the country of all sizes in state and local government, law enforcement, K through 12. If it's dealt with social media, if it's involved social media risk, policy issues, it's likely that we've run across it. It's likely that we have a free resource available to you. And certainly when it comes to archiving and record keeping, this is the lifeblood of our company. And so we're more than happy to talk to you about that. So with that, I'm going to hand back to Robert and make sure we address any remaining questions from the audience.
Okay, great. Thank you, Anil. And as Anil said, we're going to move into a time of Q&A right now. And so, Anil, I'm going to give you about 45 seconds to look through the questions. There's some good questions around elected officials and social media archiving. In the meantime, I want to reiterate three things. Number one, there are a couple of resources. Anil mentioned the Social Media Policy Guide, Comment Moderation Guide, also pages related to the respective state laws. Those are all available on our website, but we're also going to send out an email to everyone with links to those three resources, and I think you'll find them helpful. Number two, you'll see here on the screen, you can actually go on our site, and it's a really interesting feature, and in about a minute, see what your social media archive looks like. So what happens is you go on, you give us your Twitter handle, you log in, and it takes about a minute to build out, and you can actually see what is capable of being archived in your Twitter account. So anyway, it's a really interesting feature, and we encourage everyone to take a look at it. And then finally, of course, if you have any questions just in general about archiving, please reach out to us. You can either go on our website or use one of the contact forms on the screen here. So now handing it back to Anil to address some of the questions.
Thanks, Robert, and thank you all for the questions that have come in. We are scheduled here to about 2:45 Eastern time, so we'll try to get through as many of these as we can, and those we do not get to, our team will be happy to circle back with you offline and ensure that we've provided the best insight that we can on these issues. Now, first question from Adam Evan on elected officials. Does a personal page need a policy spelled out or just the official page? And I think this question is about the fact that a lot of times public officials have both their official presence and they have their own personal social media site. And this is a really sticky issue, a gray area issue in terms of public officials and how they should set up their presence. But what's not gray, what is actually black and white, is at the moment a public official is conducting business, whatever medium they're using becomes an official medium. So if they have a private Facebook page and they're campaigning for some kind of legislative change, or they're answering citizen questions on their private social media, that private social media, those communications are effectively now official communications. And so really the answer to that, Adam, is to ensure that those public officials are separating the two. They need to be trained on this. They need to understand the policy. And to the best of anyone's ability, they need to refrain from public business on their personal page. Now, the moment they're using their personal page, yes, you need to treat it like an official presence, make the policy clear, and you need to have records and all that stuff. Thank you for that question. Next question from Kelly Brakeman. How often should social media be archived? Daily, weekly, monthly, etc.? This is a great question, Kelly. And the answer is this. You want to archive social media as fast as you possibly can, because social media is real time and it's out of your control, meaning that it's, again, on Facebook servers, on Twitter servers. It does not belong to your IT, and you are responsible for those communications even if they get deleted. And so the faster you can archive, the smaller that window of deletion. And so a lot of archiving solutions are out there that focus on websites, they won't focus on email, maybe they do social media as a secondary. And they take this daily, or maybe even archive every few hours. It's not good enough. You need to look for an archiving solution that's real-time or near real-time, getting the information as soon as possible from the network, because you will lose records even when minutes pass. Okay, next question again from Adam. On personal pages on Facebook, they only allow 5,000 friends. We have to delete people because of the friend limit. Often, is there a public records issue here? And again, I have not seen any case law around the likes of people who like your page, or your followers on Twitter per se. It's really about the communications. But the bigger thing here, again, is if you're using a personal page for public business, that can often be a problem. And so you do want to convert that to a public page on Facebook if possible, or refrain from using your personal profiles for agency business. And we have one question here from Cheyenne. We've been trying to get a policy up and running for over 12 months. Seems to be held up in legal. Any advice? And Cheyenne, you are not alone. There's a lot of agencies that we've worked with that went through this long 12 to 18-month period where they were trying to get a social media policy in place. And the best advice I can give you is to convince the internal team to not reinvent the wheel, but to look at the agencies just like yours, just around you, maybe a neighboring city, your town, maybe your county, whatever agency you are. It could be even a different state, and have your legal team connect with that legal team, use their policy, connect with that team, and get them comfortable with the fact that this is a solved problem in a way. There's a best practice across the industry, and really try to expedite that process by leveraging the work of other agencies. Okay, and we're right at 2:45. I'm going to take one last question here from Stephanie Guzman on capturing information across different social media sites. The question is, I understand that governments are responsible for capturing comments on Facebook pages. What about @tweets on Twitter? And I believe Stephanie's referring to this notion of an @mention. And if you look at how governments are using social media, again, social media is a great platform for customer service in any industry, certainly in government. And so a lot of agencies, when they can receive @mentions, they're either able to respond to those @mentions or use that information. Because that @mention is directed at your agency, most records bodies look at that as a communication received. So an @mention is very much like you receiving an email, receiving some other kind of message. And so yes, you do want to treat those @mentions as public record and retain them. And especially if you look at the way your own agency is using social media, you'll probably find that at least one of those profiles, if you ever responded to an @mention or even used the information in an @mention to affect how you do something, that immediately it meets the public records requirements. So great, lots of questions coming in. We had a wonderful attendance here for this webinar. We hope that we've given you some actionable items for your agency. And we appreciate your attendance. We look forward to your feedback and areas where we can continue to be a resource to the industry. And most of all, wish you a great rest of your Tuesday and a great rest of your week. Thank you.